You picture space as absolute freedom. The great open dark, no floor, no ceiling, every direction lying equally open before you. But here is what no one ever told you. In the entire history of our species, across every rocket, every probe, every machine we have ever fired off this planet, we have only ever truly traveled in one direction, sideways. We were born on a flat disk, and we have never once left it. There is a true up, straight out of the plane that holds the sun and all its worlds, and an entire dimension of the universe is hovering directly over your head right now, and we are almost completely powerless to reach it, not because anything blocks the way. There is no wall. So what, exactly, is holding us down? Get comfortable. Hit subscribe if you're new here, because by the end of this, the open sky above you will feel less like freedom and more like a ceiling you have lived beneath your whole life. Now, let's slowly ease into this. Part 1. The open sky that isn't. Think about what space is supposed to be. The great, three-dimensional dark. An emptiness so complete that there is no up and no down, no floor and no ceiling, no walls to press against. A place where, if you could only get there, you could drift in any direction you wanted, forever, with nothing to stop you. We call it the final frontier, and we mean it. Of all the words we attach to space, the one underneath all the others is freedom. But here is something strange to sit with tonight. You have never lived in that freedom, not for a single second. No human being ever has, and not because we have not gone far enough. We have sent machines billions of miles from home. We have landed on other worlds. We have photographed the rings of Saturn from up close and watched storms churn across the face of Jupiter. We have done extraordinary things. And yet, in the entire history of our species, across every rocket, every probe, every lander, every satellite, every machine we have ever fired off the surface of this planet, we have only ever truly travelled in one direction, sideways. That word is going to do a lot of work over the next couple of hours, so let it settle for a moment. Sideways, not up, not out of the great flat openness into the true dark above it, sideways. We are creatures born on a flat disk, and when we finally found a way off the ground, we left along the only road the disk would allow. We have been sliding across a table we cannot escape, and we have been doing it for so long and so completely that we have mistaken the table for the whole universe. You may be tempted to push back on that already, and good. You might be thinking of all the famous images, the astronauts floating, tumbling slowly in their capsules, drifting in what certainly looks like perfect three-dimensional freedom. And it is true that an astronaut in orbit can turn any way they like inside their craft. But the craft itself and the astronaut inside it are still pinned to the plane just as firmly as you are pinned to your bed. They are circling in the same flat sheet, carried by the same inherited motion, unable to rise out of it any more than we can. The freedom to somersault inside a capsule is not the freedom to go up. It is the same sideways imprisonment as ours, just with a better view. When you watch those weightless astronauts and feel that they have finally escaped into open space, you are seeing the deepest version of the illusion this whole story is about. They look free. They are riding the wheel exactly as we are. I want to be careful here, because this is not a story about something blocking our way. There is no wall. That phrase is going to come back later, so hold on to it. There is no wall. Nothing material stands between us and the direction we cannot go. The dark above the plane of the planets is just as empty, just as open, just as inviting as the dark we have already crossed. If anything, it is emptier, and still we cannot get there. The barrier is not a thing. The barrier is a kind of motion you have been part of your entire life, without ever once feeling it. You think of up as simply looking at the sky. You tilt your head back, and there it is, the up direction, full of stars. But that up is a lie of perspective. That is not up at all. That is just away from the ground beneath your feet, which is a local accident of where you happen to be standing on a spinning ball. There is another up, a true, absolute vertical. A single direction that points straight out of the flat sheet that holds the sun and all its worlds. And here is the part that should keep you company tonight as you drift off. An entire dimension of the universe is hovering directly over your head, right now, in a direction you have a word for but no real experience of, and our entire species is almost completely powerless to reach it. Let me make that absolute vertical real for you, because it is easy to nod along without quite picturing it. Right now, wherever you are, the sun sits somewhere in relation to you, and the sun lives in the flat plane along with all the planets. There is a direction that points straight out of that plane, perpendicular to it, the way a flagpole points straight up out of a flat field. That is the true up, I mean. It is not the same as the up you feel, which just points away from the floor of your room. The true vertical might, at this moment, be angled off towards some patch of sky you would never think twice about, or down through the earth beneath you. It does not care about your floor or your ceiling. It is defined by the great disk of the solar system, not by you. And along that one specific direction, out of the plane on either side, lies the dark we have never crossed. We have managed it once. One time, in all of human history, we have genuinely wrenched ourselves off the flat sheet and looked back at it from above. And we could not even do that on our own. We had to throw ourselves at a giant and let it fling us upward like a stone from a sling. We will get to that giant and to the desperate, almost absurd thing we had to do to escape the plane even for a moment. But first, I want to show you the trap itself, because once you see it, you will never look at a map of the solar system the same way again. I should be honest with you about why this matters beyond mere curiosity, because it is easy to treat all of this as a fun fact and move on. It matters because it quietly reshapes the entire story we tell about ourselves as a spacefaring species. We tend to imagine our future in space as an ever-widening sphere of reach, expanding outward in all directions, claiming more and more of the open dark as our own. That picture is wrong, or at least badly incomplete. Our reach does not expand as a sphere. It expands as a disk, spreading out along the plane, flattening as it grows, hugging the same thin sheet we were born into. The honest map of our future, drawn out to its furthest plausible edges, is still nearly flat. And recognizing that does not diminish what we have done. It clarifies it. It tells us what kind of creatures we actually are in this actual universe, rather than the kind we imagine ourselves to be in the stories. And there is a deeper peace available in seeing your true situation clearly than in any comforting fiction about boundless freedom. So get comfortable and let us begin by doing something very simple. Let us look at the map. Before we do, let me give you one more thing to hold, because it changes how the rest of this will feel. We are going to talk about energy and motion and orbits, and it would be easy to hear all of that as engineering, as a problem of building bigger rockets that some future generation will simply solve. I want to gently take that comfort away, because it is not true. This is not a limitation of our technology. It is a limitation written into the geometry of where we live and how we got here. A civilization 1,000 years more advanced than ours, with engines we cannot dream of, would face the exact same bill we face. They might be able to pay it. We cannot. But the bill itself does not shrink with cleverness. It is set by the universe, not by us. So when I say up is nearly impossible, I do not mean impossible for now. I mean impossible in a way that has nothing to do with the year on the calendar. Part 2. Turn the map sideways. You have seen the picture of the solar system 1,000 times. It is one of the first images of science that any of us ever learns. The sun, large and golden, sitting in the middle, and around it the planets, each one tracing its own neat circle. Mercury closest in, then Venus, then our own pale blue Earth, then rust-coloured Mars, then the wide gap of the asteroid belt, and beyond it the giants. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. We draw it as a great bullseye, a set of rings nested one inside the other, with the sun as the bright centre of the target. And when you look at that picture, the feeling it gives you is openness. It looks like an enormous, generous territory. All that space between the orbits, all those directions you could travel. It looks like the most open place imaginable. A great wheel of possibility with our little world riding along one of the rings. Now do something with that picture. Take it and turn it. Tip it on its edge, so that instead of looking down at the bullseye from above, you are looking at it from the side. Edge on, the way you would look at a dinner plate if you lowered your eye to the level of the table. Watch what happens to all that openness. It vanishes. From the side, the solar system is not a generous, open territory at all. It is a sheet, a disk so thin, relative to how wide it is, that if you shrank it down to the size of a dinner plate, the entire thing, sun and planets and all, would be thinner than the plate itself. The planets do not orbit at wild, scattered angles, soaring high above the sun and plunging far below it. They are all locked into very nearly the same flat level surface. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, the asteroids, the gas giants, almost all of them sit within just a few degrees of one shared plane. Astronomers call that plane the ecliptic, and it is the single most important piece of architecture in our corner of space. If you could see it, it would look like grooves carved into a vinyl record. Each planet riding in its own circular groove, all of them in the same flat black disk, all of them turning in the same direction, all of them pinned to the same level. The sun is not at the centre of an open three-dimensional sphere of worlds. The sun is at the centre of a plate, and humanity, on the third groove out, is stuck on the rim. Let me give you the actual numbers, because they are more extreme than the picture suggests. The plane that the Earth traces around the sun is the reference. Everything else is measured as a tilt away from it. Jupiter, the largest planet in the system, is tilted by only about 1 1/3 degrees, Saturn by about 2.5, Uranus less than 1 degree, Neptune less than 2. Even Venus, the most tilted of our close neighbours, sits only a little over 3 degrees off. The single biggest outlier among the major planets is Mercury, and even Mercury is only about 7 degrees off the plane. 7 degrees on a system spread across billions of miles. If you built a scale model of the solar system on a tabletop, every planet would sit so close to dead flat that you would struggle to see any tilt at all without a precise instrument. They are not roughly in a plane. They are astonishingly, almost suspiciously, exactly in a plane. The thinness of it is the part that breaks intuition. We are used to thinking of the solar system as immense, and it is, but it is huge almost entirely in 2 directions and barely at all in the third. It is wide beyond comprehension and flat beyond belief. The disk is so wide that light from the sun takes hours to cross it, and yet, compared to that width, its thickness is almost nothing. We live in a structure that has, for all practical purposes, length and width and almost no height, and the direction it lacks, the height, the thinness, is precisely the direction we are about to find we cannot travel. The universe gave our home 2 generous dimensions and 1 starved one, and it is the starved one that has us trapped. There is one more feature of the disk worth noticing, because it deepens just how locked in everything is. The planets do not merely share a plane, they almost all orbit in the same direction around the sun, the same way the original cloud was spinning, and most of them even rotate on their own axes in that same direction. The whole system turns one way, like a single great wheel with many spokes, every part of it carrying the memory of that first rotation. The flatness and the shared direction are two faces of the same fact. A spinning cloud collapses into a turning disk, and everything that condenses from the disk inherits both the flatness and the spin together. So we are not just pinned to a plane, we are pinned to a plane that is itself turning, all of it in one direction. A sprawling, slow wheel that we are riding along the rim of, and have been riding since before there was anyone here to ride it. It is a humbling thing to realize that the very orderliness of our solar system, the neat circles, the shared plane, the common direction, the tidy diagrams we draw, is the same orderliness that traps us. We tend to admire the order. It looks designed, almost peaceful, all those worlds turning together in their level grooves. But that order is a cage. A more chaotic system, with planets flung at every angle, orbits crossing and tilting wildly, would in some sense have been a freer one to live in, with paths leading in every direction. Our system's beautiful flatness is precisely what funnels all motion into the plane and starves the vertical. The thing that makes our solar system look so elegant in a textbook is the same thing that has kept us, for our entire existence, sliding across a single sheet, unable to rise. Order and imprisonment, here, are the same fact wearing two faces. Why is it flat? That part is worth knowing, because the flatness is not a coincidence, and it is not a choice, it is a fossil. A frozen memory of how the whole system was born. Billions of years ago, before there was an Earth or a sun, there was an enormous cloud of gas and dust slowly turning. And as gravity pulled that cloud inward on itself, the turning got faster, the way a spinning skater speeds up when she pulls her arms in. A spinning cloud cannot collapse into a neat ball. The spin flings material outward at the equator, while gravity keeps pulling it in along the poles. And the result, every single time, is a disk. A flat, spinning plate of material with a growing star in the middle. The planets formed later, condensing out of that already flat disk, like raindrops forming in an already existing cloud. They were born flat because the cloud was flat. They are flat today because nothing has ever happened to lift them out. So the plane is not a barrier somebody installed. The plane is the shape of our own origin, still holding us in place billions of years later. We live on the frozen record of the sun's first spin. And because everything formed in that flat disk, almost everything we could ever want to visit is in the flat disk with us. Which sounds, at first, like good news. It sounds convenient. All our destinations, laid out neatly along the same level road. It is convenient. That is exactly the problem. Because the road being so convenient in one direction is the very thing that makes the other direction, the direction straight up out of the plate, so very nearly impossible. To understand why, we have to stop looking at the map and start paying attention to something moving, something you are riding right now. Part 3. The Sideways Species. We love to talk about leaving Earth as though it were an act of defiance. We say we are piercing the heavens. We say we are slipping the surly bonds, leaving the cradle, breaking free of the planet that held us. Every rocket launch comes wrapped in that language, the language of breaking upward and outward into the open void. And it is beautiful language. It is just not quite true. When we fly to Mars, we are not aiming up and out into the dark above the plane. We are sliding sideways across the plate to a groove a little further out from the sun. When we send a probe to Jupiter or Saturn or all the way to Neptune, we are not climbing. We are coasting along the flat disk from our groove to a more distant one, staying inside the same thin sheet the whole way. Every planetary mission we have ever flown, every triumph of exploration you have ever read about, has happened inside the plane. We have crossed enormous distances. We have just never once climbed off the record. Consider the farthest things we have ever made. The two Voyager probes, launched in the 1970s, are now the most distant human-built objects in existence. They are billions of miles away, out past the planets, drifting in the true interstellar dark, sending back their last faint whispers across a gulf so wide that the signals take most of a day to reach us. They are, by any measure, our greatest escape, the farthest we have ever thrown anything. And how did they get there? Did they fly up, out of the plane, into the open dark above the disk? No, they slid sideways. They coasted out along the flat plate, groove by groove, past Jupiter and Saturn, borrowing a little speed from each giant as they passed, until finally they simply ran off the edge of the table. They did not leave the plane. They reached the rim of it and kept going, still riding in very nearly the same flat sheet they were born into. Even our greatest escape was a sideways escape. We did not break upward into the void. We slid until there was no more table left. Think about how the Voyagers gained their speed, because it tells you everything about how we move. They did not carry enough fuel to reach the outer solar system on their own. No spacecraft we have ever built could. Instead, they were aimed to pass close to the giant planets in sequence, and each time they swept past one, they stole a little of that planet's orbital motion, slingshotting forward, gaining speed without burning a drop of fuel. It is an elegant, almost miraculous technique. But notice what it requires. It requires the giants to be there, lined up in the plane, in a row along the level highway. The slingshot only works because everything is flat, because the planets are all in the same groove, ready to be visited one after another. Our single greatest method of reaching the distant dark is itself a creature of the plane. It only works sideways. The very trick that flung our farthest probes into interstellar space is a trick that can only push us along the disk, never up out of it. This is the quiet tragedy hidden inside our proudest achievements. Every map of our exploration, every dotted line tracing a probe's path across the solar system, lies almost perfectly flat. We have drawn an enormous, intricate web of journeys, and if you turned that web on its edge, it would nearly disappear into a single line. All of it, every mission, pressed into the same thin sheet. We have been everywhere a flat creature can go, and nowhere else. We call ourselves explorers of space, and we are. But we are explorers of a surface, paddlers on a film, and the third dimension, the one that would make space truly three-dimensional for us, has stayed almost entirely closed. It would be one thing if we simply had not gotten around to going up yet. If it were merely next on a list, we would reach in time. But that is not the situation. Going up is not waiting at the end of a queue of harder and harder missions we will eventually work through. It sits outside the queue entirely, in a category by itself, separated from everything we have done by a gulf of energy so wide that no amount of incremental progress along the plane brings us any closer to crossing it. We could fly 1,000 more missions to 1,000 more destinations across the disk, and at the end of all of them we would be exactly as far from going up as we are tonight. Sideways progress, no matter how immense, never accumulates into the ability to rise. The two are not on the same ladder. They never were. This is what I mean when I say we are a sideways species. We evolved on a hostage planet, locked into a flat groove around our star, and when we finally found the strength to leave, we left along the only road the groove allowed. We are very, very good at moving along the plane. We have visited every planet in it. We have thrown machines clear off the edge of it, and we are almost entirely helpless at the one thing the plane does not permit, which is to rise. It is a strange thing to call an entire species sideways, so let me defend the word, because I think it is exact. A creature is shaped by the space it can actually move through. A fish is shaped by water. It can move through in all directions, and so a fish is a true, three-dimensional animal, rising and diving and turning at will. A bird, in its element, is the same. But we, in space, are not like the fish or the bird. We are like something living on the flat surface of a pond, able to skate anywhere across the film of the water and utterly unable to go up into the air or down into the depths. To such a creature, the surface would feel like the whole of reality, the only place that exists, simply because it is the only place it can reach. And that is us, exactly, in space. The flat plane feels like the whole solar system to us, like all of reachable space, not because it is, but because it is the only part our motion allows us to touch. We are surface dwellers in a three-dimensional cosmos, mistaking our two-dimensional freedom for the freedom of the whole. You might be wondering why. If there is no wall, if the dark above is just as empty as the dark we have already crossed, then what exactly is stopping us from pointing a rocket straight up out of the plane and going? It is a fair question, and the answer is the core of this whole story. The thing stopping us is not in front of the rocket, it is already inside it. It is a motion we are all part of, a speed we are all carrying every second of every day, and we cannot feel it at all. Take a breath and notice how strange that sentence is, because we are about to spend the next part really living inside it. The thing that traps us is not out there, ahead of us, where we could see it and study it and plan to overcome it. The thing that traps us is in here, in us, in the spacecraft, in the planet, in your own resting body, carried along so smoothly and so completely that it has never once announced itself to any sense you possess. We are used to obstacles being external: a locked door, a high wall, a wide sea, a steep mountain, things you can point at and measure and set yourself against. This obstacle cannot be pointed at. It travels with you. It is part of you. It is the very motion that makes every other journey possible, turned, for this one direction, into the thing that forbids you. To understand the trap, then, you do not look outward at the dark you cannot reach. You look inward, at the speed you cannot feel. So let us do exactly that. Right now, as you lie there, you are moving, not a little, enormously. And the direction you are moving is the very thing that has trapped us. Part 4. The shackle you cannot feel. You feel like you are lying still. That is the most natural feeling in the world. The bed is steady beneath you. The room is not moving. The walls stay where they are. By every sense you have, you are at rest. And every sense you have is wrong. The Earth is racing around the Sun at roughly 67,000 miles an hour. Let that number sit for a moment, because it is hard to believe. 67,000 miles an hour. That is about 30 kilometers every single second. In the time it takes you to read this sentence, you and the entire planet beneath you have moved a couple of 100 miles along your orbit. You have been doing it your whole life. You did it while you were being born, and you have done it every second since, carried sideways along the flat plane of the solar system at a speed so enormous that if you could feel it, you would never sleep again. And you cannot feel it, because everything around you, the air, the bed, the planet, the moon, is moving with you, all together, all at the same impossible speed, so smoothly that there is nothing to push against and nothing to mark the motion. The ride is perfectly silent. That is the cruelest part. The shackle does not even feel like a shackle. It feels like stillness. To get a sense of how fast 67,000 miles an hour really is, set it against the speeds you already know. The fastest passenger jets cross the sky at perhaps 600 miles an hour. A rifle bullet leaves the barrel at maybe 2,000. The fastest spacecraft we have ever launched, diving close to the Sun, reach a few 100,000 miles an hour, and we consider those almost unimaginably fast. And here you are, lying in bed, doing nothing, going 67,000. You are moving more than 100 times faster than a bullet, right now, without the slightest sensation of motion. If you could somehow feel your true speed through space, the gentlest moment of your life would feel like being fired from the largest gun ever built, continuously, forever. The stillness you feel is the single most convincing illusion you will ever experience, and you experience it every waking and sleeping second. The reason you feel nothing is itself worth understanding, because it is the same reason we cannot simply step off the moving plane. Motion, in the deepest sense physics has found, is not something you can feel directly at all. You can only feel changes in motion, the push of acceleration when a car speeds up, the lurch when it brakes, the tug when it turns. Steady, smooth motion, no matter how fast, produces no sensation whatsoever, because there is nothing to compare it to from inside. You and everything around you are coasting together, and so, from inside the ride does not exist. This is why no one ever discovered, just by living, that the Earth was hurtling around the sun. It took centuries of careful reasoning to uncover a motion we are all immersed in every moment, and it is why the shackle is so total. You cannot resist a force you cannot perceive. You cannot fight your way off a current that, from inside, feels exactly like standing still. Now think about what that means for a rocket. We picture a launch as a fresh start. The countdown ends, the engines light, and the spacecraft begins its journey from zero, choosing its direction, free to go wherever we point it. But that is not what happens. A spacecraft does not begin at rest. It begins exactly as fast as the planet it left. The instant a probe clears the launch pad, before it has done anything at all under its own power, it is already moving 67,000 miles an hour sideways in the plane of the solar system, in the same direction the Earth is going. It inherits all of our motion the moment it is born, the way a child thrown from a moving train is already moving as fast as the train. For most of what we want to do, that inheritance is the greatest gift imaginable. Suppose you want to reach Mars, in its groove, a little further out from the sun. You do not have to build up that 67,000 miles an hour from nothing. You already have it. You are already sweeping along the flat plate in very nearly the right direction. All you have to do is nudge your speed a little, lift yourself to a slightly wider groove, and coast. The sun's gravity does most of the work, the way a curve in a track guides a rolling marble. This is why reaching the other planets is, in the grand scheme of things, almost cheap. It is why we have managed to visit every single one of them. The flat plane is a moving walkway, and we were born already standing on it, already gliding in the useful direction. To go to another world in the plane, you barely have to fight the current at all. You just lean into it. This is the secret behind why interplanetary travel, which sounds so heroic, is in pure energy terms surprisingly gentle. When a probe leaves for Jupiter, it is not punching its way across the solar system by brute force. It is making a small adjustment to a motion it already has, choosing a slightly different path through the same plane, and then falling along that path for years, coasting, engines off, the whole time. We do not power our way to the outer planets. We aim carefully, and then we drift, riding the inherited current, letting the sun's gravity shape the fall. The journeys take years, not because we are fighting hard the entire way, but because we are barely pushing at all. We are leaves on the moving water, steering gently, going where the flat current already wanted to take us. But now suppose you do not want to go to another groove. Suppose you want to do the thing this whole video is about. You want to go up, you want to climb straight out of the flat plate, perpendicular to it, into the open dark, above the disk, where nothing orbits and almost nothing has ever travelled. You point your rocket at that true vertical, that absolute up, and you prepare to fire. And immediately, the gift becomes a curse. Because that 67,000 miles an hour you inherited, the speed that made every other journey easy, is pointed in exactly the wrong direction. It is pulling you sideways, hard, along the plane, while you are trying to go straight up out of it. You are like a swimmer trying to cross a wide, fast river by swimming straight for the far bank and finding yourself swept downstream no matter how hard you kick. The current does not care which way you are facing. It carries you sideways all the same. And the river is not gentle. Picture the fastest river you can imagine, a torrent moving so quickly that nothing could ever pause in it, and now picture trying not to cross it, but to rise straight up out of it into the air. You cannot. The water has you. To leave the water upward, you would first have to match its speed exactly, to stop moving relative to the flow, to come to rest within the torrent itself, and only then push up and out. But the torrent is moving at 67,000 miles an hour, and matching it, cancelling it, coming to rest inside it, is the very thing we cannot afford. So, we stay in the flow. We get extraordinarily good at crossing back and forth, at reaching any point on the surface, at riding the current to distant shores. And the one move we can never make, the move straight up out of the water, into the open air above, stays closed, not because the air is barred to us, but because we can never stop swimming long enough to leave the river. So before you can go up, you have to deal with the current. You cannot simply add an upward push on top of your sideways sprint, because then you do not go up, you go diagonally, a slightly tilted sideways, still trapped in motion across the plane. To genuinely rise, to climb cleanly out of the plate, you first have to do something that sounds simple and turns out to be nearly impossible. You have to stop. You have to hit the brakes. Part 5. To go up, first hit the brakes. Here is the thing about stopping in space that almost nobody thinks about, because down here on the ground, stopping is the easiest thing in the world. You take your foot off the gas. You touch the brake. Friction does the rest. The road grabs your tires, the air pushes back, and within seconds you are at rest. Stopping is free. Stopping is what happens when you stop trying. In space, there is nothing to stop you. No road, no air, no friction of any kind. An object moving 67,000 miles an hour will keep moving 67,000 miles an hour forever, in a straight line, until something actively pushes back against it. And the only way to push back, out there, is to carry your own engine and your own fuel and burn it in the opposite direction, throwing mass out the back to slow the rest of you down. To stop a spacecraft that is sweeping along with the Earth, you have to fire your engines against the direction of motion, against the orbit, against the current, and you have to keep firing until you have cancelled every last bit of that 67,000 miles an hour. You have to bring your spacecraft to a dead, absolute halt relative to the Sun. It is worth pausing on just how alien this is to everything your body knows. Every experience you have ever had of stopping has been free, because the Earth is generous with friction. You stop walking by simply ceasing to push, and the ground and the air drag you to rest in a stride or two. You imagine space as the place where, finally, you could glide effortlessly, and that is true, but the same effortlessness that lets you glide forever also means you can never coast to a halt. There is no kindly resistance waiting to slow you down. Out there, stopping is not the absence of effort. Stopping is the single most expensive kind of effort there is, because you must manufacture, out of fuel you carried from home, every bit of the resistance the Earth used to give you for nothing. In space, going is easy and stopping is the hard part, which is the exact reverse of every instinct a ground-dwelling creature has ever formed. This reversal runs so profound that it reshapes what the word effort even means out there. You might wonder why, if stopping is so important, we do not simply build the enormous stopping rocket anyway, accept the cost, raise the tower of fuel into the sky, and pay the price to send one mission straight up. The answer is that the cost is not merely large, it is the kind of large that defeats the whole purpose. By the time you had built a rocket big enough to carry the fuel to stop a meaningful payload, dead relative to the Sun, and then the fuel to carry that fuel, and so on down the cascade, The rocket would be so huge and so consumed by its own propellant that there would be almost nothing left over to actually send. You would have built a mountain of fuel to deliver a pebble. The mission collapses under its own requirements before it ever launches. This is why no space agency has ever seriously planned to brake to a stop and climb straight up. It is not timidity, it is arithmetic. The straightforward way up is not expensive in the way a difficult mission is expensive. It is expensive in the way a perpetual motion machine is expensive, which is to say, it does not close, it does not work, no matter how much money you throw at it. And this is the quiet reason the dream of going up never even makes it into our plans. It is not that anyone considered it and decided it was too hard for now. It is that the moment you run the numbers, the idea simply falls apart in your hands. The direct ascent is not a hard mission waiting for a braver generation. It is a non-mission, a thing that cannot be built in the form we imagine, the way a square circle cannot be drawn no matter how skilled the artist. So instead, every plan that has ever wanted to leave the plane has had to abandon the direct route entirely and look for some sideways trick, some slow accumulation of speed over decades, some borrowed throw from a giant. The honest, head-on way up does not appear in our space programs at all, not because we lack ambition, but because, when you look closely, it was never really there to attempt. On Earth, a journey costs effort, and arrival is rest. You work to get somewhere, and when you arrive, you stop, and stopping is the reward. In space, it is inverted. The journey, the long coast across the plane, is the easy part, costing almost nothing once you are moving. It is the arriving, the matching speeds, the slowing into orbit, the coming to rest that drains the tanks. Every spacecraft that has ever settled into orbit around another world had to spend precious fuel doing it, fighting to shed the very speed that carried it there. The motion is free. The stillness is what you pay for. And the deepest stillness of all, coming to a dead stop relative to the sun, so that you might finally rise, is the most expensive stillness in the entire solar system. It took our species an astonishingly long time to even realize we were moving at all, and that fact is its own kind of proof of how complete the trap is. For most of human history, the obvious truth, the one your senses scream at you, was that the Earth stands still and everything else moves around it. The sun rises and sets, the stars wheel overhead, the ground does not budge. Only after centuries of careful, counterintuitive reasoning did we work out that the opposite is true, that the steady ground beneath us is in fact tearing around the sun at a speed beyond anything in our experience, and that the apparent motion of the heavens is mostly our own motion in disguise. We had to discover, by pure thought, the very current that carries us, because we cannot feel it. And a current you had to be argued into believing exists is not a current you can ever hope to simply step out of. We are carried by a motion so smooth that we doubted it for thousands of years. How could we ever cancel what we spent millennia failing to even notice? Only then, only once you are truly at rest, hanging motionless in the plane while the earth races away from you along its groove, can you do the simple thing. Only then can you point yourself at the true vertical and begin, finally, to climb straight up out of the plate. So that is the recipe. To go up, first you stop. To stop, you cancel 67,000 miles an hour. And to cancel 67,000 miles an hour, with no road and no air to help you, you have to carry and burn an amount of fuel that turns out to be the whole problem. Because this is where the universe quietly presents the bill, and it is a bill we cannot pay. Let me put the comparison in front of you plainly, because it is one of the most counterintuitive facts in all of spaceflight, and once you really feel it, the trap snaps shut in your mind. There are two things you might want to do from here, from Earth's groove around the sun. You might want to leave the solar system entirely, to escape the sun's gravity forever and sail off into interstellar space. Or you might want to stop to kill your sideways motion and let yourself fall toward the sun, which is also exactly what you would need to do first if you wanted to climb straight up out of the plane. Two different goals: leaving forever or simply standing still. Now, every instinct you have says that leaving the entire solar system, crossing that unimaginable gulf, must be the harder of the two. Standing still sounds modest, humble, like the easy option. You are not even trying to go anywhere. You just want to stop. The instinct is exactly backward, and the gap is not small. Part 6. The bill the universe will not let us pay. To escape the sun's gravity from where the Earth sits, you do not have to do all that much. You are already moving at 30 kilometers a second along your orbit. To break free of the sun forever, you only need to be moving about 1.5 times that fast, a little over 40 kilometers a second. The extra you have to add, on top of what you already have, is only about 12 kilometers a second. 12. It is not nothing, but it is a manageable number. It is the kind of number our rockets, with enough cleverness and enough gravity assists, can actually reach. This is why those Voyager probes are out in interstellar space right now. Leaving the sun behind, it turns out, is a finite, achievable thing. Now consider the other option. You want to stop. You want to cancel your motion and come to rest relative to the sun, so that you can fall inward or climb straight up out of the plane. How much speed do you have to get rid of? All of it. The entire 30 kilometers a second. Every last bit of the sideways motion the Earth gave you. Not 12, 30. Nearly 3 times as much change in speed as you would need to leave the solar system forever. There is a strange beauty in why this is so, and it comes straight out of the geometry of orbits. To escape the sun, you do not have to overcome its gravity by main force. You only have to speed up enough that your widening, stretching path never quite curves back, that you coast outward forever on an ever-opening arc. Because you start already moving fast, already most of the way to escape, you need only a modest boost to tip over that edge. But to fall into the sun, or to stop dead so you can rise straight up, you have to defeat your own sideways speed completely, and your sideways speed is enormous. The sun's gravity is not what makes stopping hard. Your own inherited motion is what makes stopping hard. You are not fighting the sun, you are fighting the speed already in your bones. And that speed is so great that erasing it costs more than flinging yourself out of the sun's grip entirely. This is worth turning over once more, slowly, because it overturns something we feel very sure about. We assume that the sun, with its overwhelming gravity, is the great jailer of the inner solar system, the thing whose grip we would have to break to be free. And it simply is not. The sun is comparatively easy to escape from where we sit, because we already carry most of the speed we would need to leave it. The real jailer is gentler and far more total. The real jailer is our own motion, the inherited sideways rush that we cannot feel and cannot cheaply cancel. The thing that holds us is not the great fire at the center pulling us in. The thing that holds us is the quiet, invisible velocity we were born with, pushing us forever along the plane. We have spent our whole history imagining the sun as the power we are subject to, when all along the power that truly traps us is the one we carry inside ourselves, weightless and silent, mistaken every moment for stillness. Read that again, slowly, because it is the strangest sentence in this whole story. From where the Earth sits, it takes more energy to stop than it does to leave. It is harder to stand still than to escape the sun entirely. It is cheaper to become a permanent exile in the interstellar dark, never to return, than it is to simply bring yourself to a halt and rise straight up. The most modest-sounding goal in space, just stopping, just standing still, is more expensive than the most dramatic one we have ever attempted, and it gets worse because of the way rockets work. A rocket has to carry its own fuel, and that fuel has weight, and the rocket has to carry the fuel that lifts the fuel, and the fuel that lifts that fuel all the way down. This is the tyranny that governs every rocket ever built. The amount of fuel you need does not grow gently as the job gets harder. It grows exponentially. Doubling the change in speed you need does not double your fuel. It can multiply it many times over. So, when you go from needing 12 kilometers a second to needing 30, you are not asking for a rocket that is a little under 3 times bigger. You are asking for a rocket that is monstrously, absurdly larger. To build a spacecraft that could cancel the Earth's full sideways motion and then climb out of the plane, the fuel tanks would not be a little bigger than the rockets we have. They would have to be larger than the skyscrapers of a city. A tower of fuel reaching up into the clouds, all of it burned, just to bring one small spacecraft to a stop so it could finally go the one direction we cannot go, and the universe simply will not let us afford it. I want to make the cost concrete, because the numbers, abstract as they are, hide a brutal reality. A rocket that needs to change its speed by a certain amount must carry fuel, and because the fuel itself has to be accelerated along with the payload, the relationship between the speed you want and the fuel you need is not a straight line. It is a steep, accelerating curve. Past a certain point, every small increase in the speed change you demand multiplies the fuel required, and then the fuel to carry that fuel in a cascade that quickly runs away to absurdity. The jump from the 12 kilometers a second needed to escape the sun to the 30 needed to stop dead does not land you in the realm of slightly bigger rockets. It lands you in the realm of rockets that could not be built. Fuel stacks taller than any structure humanity has ever raised, a tower of propellant climbing into the sky, all of it spent to bring a single small craft to rest so that it might, at last, turn and go up. This is the moment I want you to really sit inside, because it is the center of everything. We always imagine that if some direction in space were closed to us, it would be because something was in the way. A wall, a barrier, a force pushing back. Some obstacle we could, in principle, find a way around. And the truth is so much stranger than that. There is nothing in the way. The direction straight up out of the plane is the emptiest, openest, most barrier-free direction in the entire universe. There is no wall. There has never been a wall. We could see all the way to the edge of everything if we just went that way. Let yourself feel the full strangeness of that, because it is the kind of thing that should change how the night sky looks to you. We are used to the idea that the universe limits us with distance, with the sheer unreachable size of things, and that limit feels almost fair, almost noble. The stars are far, and so we cannot reach them, and there is a clean sadness in that. But this limit is different and harder to make peace with. The dark above the plane is not far. The first stretch of it is right here, just off to the side of everything we have ever done, no farther than the planets we routinely visit. It is not distance that closes it to us. It is that we are moving the wrong way too fast to turn, and there is something almost unbearable about being denied not by an impossible distance, but by an unfeelable speed. A great distance you could at least dream of crossing someday, but how do you cross a price? How do you defeat the momentum in your own body that you cannot even sense? The most open door in existence stands wide, just to the side of us, and we sail past it forever, unable to so much as slow down enough to turn and look in. We cannot go that way. Not because anything stops us, but because we are already moving far too fast in the wrong direction, and the cost of undoing that motion is more than the cost of leaving the sun behind forever. The most open road in existence is the one we can least afford to take. The freedom is real, the openness is real, and it is, for us, completely out of reach. We are not blocked. We are simply going too fast, the wrong way, to ever turn and rise. Up is not forbidden. Up is just unaffordable. And there is something almost unbearable in the difference, because a wall you could dream of breaking, a wall you could rage against. But you cannot rage against the speed in your own body that you cannot even feel. You cannot break a price. The cage is not made of anything. The cage is made of motion, and we have been inside it, moving, since before we were born. So, if up is closed to us, you might think the dark above the plane must be empty, unreachable, and therefore irrelevant, a direction with nothing in it that we simply do not need to think about. And that is the next thing the universe is about to correct, because the vertical is not empty at all. Things live up there, and every so often, one of them falls. Part 7. The vertical is not empty. We have spent a long time now looking inward at the flat plate of the planets and our place pinned to its rim. I want to turn your attention the other way, out, far out, past the orbit of Neptune, past the last of the planets, to the very fringe of where the sun still holds any sway at all. Because something is waiting out there, and it is not flat. For most of this story, everything has lived in the plane. The planets, the moons, the asteroids, all of it riding the same thin disk. But the sun's gravity does not stop at Neptune. It reaches out, weaker and weaker, for an enormous distance further, and out there, in that faint outer reach, there is a shell, a sprawling, roughly spherical cloud of icy bodies that completely surrounds the entire solar system. We call it the Oort Cloud, and it may begin somewhere around 2,000 times the distance from the Earth to the Sun, and stretch outward to perhaps 100,000 times that distance, a meaningful fraction of the way to the nearest other star. It is so far out and so faint that we have never directly seen it. We infer it from the things that fall out of it. And here is what matters about the Oort Cloud, the thing that makes it the turning point of this whole story. It is not a disk. It is not flat. It is a ball. It is worth dwelling for a calm moment on just how strange and slow life is for the objects out there, because it is the most peaceful and the most alien place in our whole story. And there is something almost tender in the relationship between that distant, peaceful shell and our busy little plane. The two could hardly be more different. Down here, on the flat floor of the solar system, everything is crowded and fast and bright. The planets sweeping along at tens of thousands of miles an hour, the sun blazing, everything close together and rushing. Out there, in the great spherical shell, everything is dark and slow and spread impossibly thin, bodies so far apart they might never come within sight of one another, drifting at a crawl through ages of stillness. We belong to the bright, fast floor. They belong to the dark, slow sphere. And only on those rare occasions when one of them falls do the two worlds touch, when a creature of the slow, dark sphere comes plunging down into the fast, bright plane, blazes briefly across our sky, and returns to its own quiet realm. For a few months, the vertical and the plane meet. Then they part again, and we are left where we always are, on the floor, looking up. An icy body in the outer Oort cloud takes not years, but millions of years to complete a single loop around the sun, if it loops at all. The sun's pull, this far out, is so faint that other influences begin to matter as much or more. The slow tug of the galaxy itself, the occasional distant passage of another star drifting by over the ages. These objects do not feel themselves to be part of the sun's system at all, in any meaningful, day-to-day sense. They drift in a dark so profound and so still that the difference between belonging to our sun and belonging to no one is almost meaningless to them. They are the most lightly held things the sun possesses, and because they are held so lightly, the faintest disturbance, a passing star far away, a slow lean in the galaxy's gravity, can be enough, after all those ages of stillness, to tip one of them loose and start the long fall inward. The peace out there is real, and it is also fragile, and that fragility is what occasionally sends a frozen mountain plunging through our world. A great hollow sphere of ice and rock wrapped all the way around us, above and below the plane, and on every side at once. The countless objects out there are not pinned to the ecliptic the way the planets are. They were flung so far out, so long ago, that the flatness of their birth has been scrambled away. They drift in the true dark, in every direction, including the directions we cannot go. They live in the vertical, above us, below us. In the open dark over our heads, that we have been calling empty, the scale of this shell is almost impossible to hold in the mind. The planets, all of them, are crowded into the inner few billion miles around the sun. The Oort Cloud may begin thousands of times farther out than the most distant planet and stretch outward for a distance so great that its outer edge could be a meaningful fraction of the way to the nearest other star. If you imagined the orbit of Neptune as a coin on a table, the Oort Cloud would be a sphere the size of a stadium built around it. Almost all of the volume that the Sun controls, the overwhelming majority of its true domain, is not the flat plane of planets at all. It is this enormous spherical reach of dark drifting ice surrounding us on every side. The flat disk we live in, the disk that feels like the whole solar system to us, is just the bright, crowded floor of an enormous dark room, and the room itself is a sphere. It is not empty. It is full of frozen ghosts, drifting in the cold for millions of years. And every so often, something disturbs one of them. A star passes by, far away in the galaxy, and its gravity gives the cloud the faintest tug, or the slow tide of the whole Milky Way leans on it, just slightly. And one of those distant icy bodies, after millions of years of stillness, begins to fall. Imagine it for a moment. Let yourself drift out there with it. You are a chunk of ice and dark rock, far beyond the last planet, in a dark so complete that the sun is not a sun at all, but only one more bright point among the stars, no warmer to you than any of the others. You have hung here, motionless to any human sense, for longer than there have been human beings, longer than there have been continents in their present shapes. And then, so gently you would never notice the moment it began, the balance breaks. The faint grip that held you in place loosens, and you begin, after all that time, to move. Not sideways along any groove. There is no groove out here. You begin to fall, straight inward, straight down toward the distant flat sheet where all the worlds live. And as you fall, across decades, across centuries, that one bright point ahead of you slowly brightens. It grows from a star to a lamp, from a lamp to a lantern. And then, faster and faster as the sun's grip strengthens, from a lantern to a furnace, until you are racing inward at over 100,000 miles an hour, your ice beginning to boil away into an immense glowing tail behind you, and you slice down through the flat plane of the planets, crossing in months the disk that took the whole solar system to lay out, plunging past the sun, dropping out the bottom of the room, and back into the dark on the far side, not to return for thousands of years. You did not travel sideways. You fell from the ceiling, straight through the floor, and you never once obeyed the plane. That is what the vertical does. It does not stay empty and quiet above us. Now and then, it drops something straight down through our flat little world. And once, not so long ago, the entire human race looked up and watched it happen. Hold the image of that fall a little longer, because it is the clearest picture we have of the direction we cannot go. Everything about that comet's journey is the mirror image of everything we do. We move sideways, it moves vertically. We coast for years along a gentle path within the plane. It plunges across the plane in months on a path nearly perpendicular to it. We are bound, forever circling, unable to leave. It is barely bound at all, falling in once and dropping away for thousands of years before it returns, if it ever does. We pay enormous costs to change our direction even slightly. It changes nothing, asks nothing, simply obeys the long, slow pull that started it falling, and rides that pull straight through our world and out the other side. When you watch a great comet cross the sky, you are not watching a local event. You are watching a creature of the vertical pass through the plane, a visitor from the one dimension we will never truly enter, briefly, silently, on its way back to the dark. Part 8. Hale-Bopp, the scythe from the ceiling. In the spring of the year 1997, one of these ghosts broke the dark, and almost everyone alive at the time saw it. We called it Hale-Bopp, after the two observers who spotted it independently on the same night. It was a monster. Most comets that visit us have small, icy cores, a few miles across at most. Hale-Bopp's frozen core was estimated at somewhere between 25 and 40 miles wide, a nucleus so large that it dwarfed nearly every comet in recorded history. To put that in human terms, it was several times the size of the asteroid whose impact is tied to the end of the age of the dinosaurs. A frozen mountain larger than some countries, falling in from the distant dark. As the sun heated it, it unfurled a tail of dust and gas that stretched tens of millions of miles across the sky, a glowing banner longer than the distance from here to the sun. To understand why it grew so bright, you have to understand what a comet actually is and what happens to it as it falls. A comet is a dirty snowball, a clump of ices and dust that has spent its whole existence in the extreme cold, frozen solid. As it falls toward the sun and the warmth grows, those ices do not melt the way ice does on Earth. They turn directly from solid to gas, hissing off the surface, dragging dust with them, and that escaping gas and dust forms the glowing head and the long streaming tails. The bigger the frozen core, the more material there is to boil away, and the more spectacular the display. Hale-Bopp's core was so enormous that it could pour out gas and dust for months on end without exhausting itself, which is exactly why it stayed bright for so unprecedentedly long. We were watching a mountain of ancient ice slowly turning itself inside out as it fell, and there was simply so much of it that the show went on and on. For 18 months, this thing hung in our sky and was visible to the naked eye. 18 months. That is a record. Most bright comets give us a few weeks, a fleeting visitor that comes and goes before most people think to look up. Hale-Bopp stayed and stayed, night after night, season after season, a smear of cold light that became, for a year and a half, simply part of the sky. An entire generation remembers it. People who have never thought about astronomy before or since remember stepping outside on an ordinary evening and seeing it hanging there. What almost no one watching it realized is how far it had come and how long it had been falling to reach that moment in our sky. Hale-Bopp had not appeared from nowhere. It had been falling inward for an immense span of time, dropping from far out in the dark on a path tilted steeply out of the plane, accelerating the whole way as the sun's grip slowly tightened. By the time it became visible to us, it had already travelled a distance that humbles the imagination, plunging down through the vertical toward the flat sheet of the planets, gathering speed across years and years of fall. And the visit we saw, the 18 months of glory, was the briefest sliver of its existence, a moment of fire and light at the bottom of an enormous, slow, dark plunge. Before it, ages of frozen drifting. After it, the long climb back out and away, not to return for something like 25 centuries. We caught it at the single, bright instant of a journey measured in millennia. But the size was not even the most important thing about it. The most important thing about Hale-Bopp, for our story, was the angle. It did not come gliding in along the flat plane of the planets, merging politely onto the level highway the way an asteroid would. Hale-Bopp dropped in almost perfectly perpendicular to the plane of the solar system. Its orbit is tilted by very nearly 90 degrees. It came straight down from the ceiling, plunged through the flat sheet where all the worlds live, swung around the sun, and dropped back out the bottom, headed back into the distant dark from which it came. It will not return for roughly 2,500 years. Think about what that interval means in human terms. The last time Hale-Bopp passed near the Sun, before 1997, was thousands of years ago, in the distant past of human civilization, when the first great cities were young. The next time it comes, thousands of years from now, there may be no one who remembers us at all. It crosses our world once in a span longer than recorded history, drops through our plane in a few short months, and is gone again into the vertical for longer than our entire civilization has existed. We happen to be alive and looking up for one of its rare passages. Whole civilizations have risen and fallen between its visits. It belongs to the slow rhythm of the dark above the plane, not to our hurried world, and we were lucky, in a way few generations are, to be standing on the rim of the plate at the exact moment the scythe came down. Sit with the picture of it. For 18 months, the entire human species stood on the rim of the flat plate and watched a glowing scythe, a frozen mountain trailing a tail of light, slice vertically down through the one groove we are trapped in. It went the one direction we cannot go. It crossed, in a matter of months, the very dimension that is closed to us by the cost of the brakes we cannot afford. It came from the place we cannot reach, passed through our world without effort, and left for the place we cannot follow. And almost no one who looked up at it understood that they were watching a visitor from the only direction in the universe our species has never truly travelled. There is a particular ache in that gap between what people saw and what was actually happening. Millions of people stepped outside on ordinary evenings across a year and a half and looked at that smear of light and felt the small thrill of seeing a comet, and most of them carried away nothing more than that. A pretty thing in the sky. A photograph for the album. Very few of them knew that the angle was the real wonder, that this was not a thing gliding along our familiar level highway, but a thing dropping vertically through it, arriving from and departing to a direction every rocket we have ever built has been unable to enter. The most profound fact about Hale-Bopp was invisible, precisely because it was about geometry, about the direction of the fall, and the direction of a fall is not something the naked eye can read. We all watched the messenger. Almost none of us read the message, which was simply this: there is an up, things come from it, and you cannot follow them home. Hale-Bopp was not unique. It was simply the most spectacular recent example of the only kind of visitor we ever get from the vertical. Long-period comets, falling out of that great spherical shell, dropping through our plane from above or below, are the messengers from the dimension we cannot enter. They are the universe occasionally reaching down through the ceiling we cannot pass, just to remind us that the ceiling is there and that there is a whole house above it. Every one of these long-period comets carries the same hidden lesson, written in the angle of its fall. When you next hear that a bright comet is coming, and you step outside to look for it, try to hold this in your mind as you find that smudge of light. You are not merely seeing a comet. You are seeing the rare meeting of two worlds that almost never touch, the slow dark sphere reaching down into the fast bright plane, a traveller from the forbidden direction passing briefly through ours. The comet will seem to hang there gently, almost still, but that stillness is an illusion of distance. It is plunging through the vertical at a speed we could never match, and arriving from a place we could never reach, and in a few weeks or months it will be gone again, back up and out into the dark we cannot follow it into. Each comet is a small, silent demonstration of the entire trap performed in the sky above your head, free for anyone who knows how to read the angle of a falling light. Part 9. The Locked Room and the One Ascent. Let me tell you about the locked room, because it is closer than you think. It is not at the edge of the universe. It is right here, in our own solar system, directly above and below our own sun. We have done astonishing things with our eyes and our machines. We have mapped the surface of distant Pluto in detail, charting its frozen plains and mountains from 1 billion miles away. We have photographed the swirling, centuries-old storms in the clouds of Jupiter. We have built telescopes that can look almost 13 billion years into the past to watch the very first galaxies igniting in the early universe. Our reach, in some directions, is almost beyond comprehension. We have seen the beginning of time. And yet, directly above our own sun, and directly below it, straight out of the flat plane of the planets, there are massive blind spots we have almost never visited. Whole regions of our own solar system, perpendicular to the plane, that we have studied far less thoroughly than we have studied galaxies billions of light years away. We can see to the dawn of the cosmos in one direction, and we are nearly blind in another direction. That is, in cosmic terms, right next door. It is a locked room in the very center of our own home, and it is locked for one reason and one reason only. We cannot afford the fuel to go and look. The brakes are too expensive, the sideways speed is too great, the door to that room is not bolted shut, it is simply priced out of reach, and so it stays closed. There is something almost embarrassing about this, when you lay it out plainly. We have flown spacecraft to every planet. We have a machine that landed on a comet. We have rovers that have driven for years across the surface of Mars. We have telescopes parked 1 million miles from Earth, peering back to the first light of the universe. By any reasonable accounting, we are a spacefaring civilization. And yet the regions directly above and below our own sun, a stone's throw away by the standards of the cosmos, remain among the least explored places we know of, not because they are far, not because they are hostile, simply because reaching them means going up, and up is the one direction the plane will not give us for free. We have crossed the whole flat floor of our house many times over, and we have almost never managed to glance at the ceiling. So how did we ever open it, even once? How did we manage the single ascent, the one time we genuinely rose up out of the plane and looked down on our own star from above its pole? The mission was called Ulysses, and it launched in the year 1990, carried into orbit aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. The reason the poles of the sun were worth all that trouble is itself a small lesson in how the plane limits even our knowledge. Everything we build orbits in the plane, which means everything we build looks at the sun forever from the side, forever around its equator. We had centuries of observations of the sun's middle, and almost nothing of its top and bottom, the way you might know a person's face intimately, and have never once seen the crown of their head. The sun's poles are not a trivial detail. The sun's magnetic field, its great cycles of activity, the streams of particles it pours out into the solar system, all behave differently at the poles than at the equator, and we simply could not see that behavior from within the plane. To understand our own star fully, we needed to look down on it from above, and to look down on it from above, we needed to leave the plane, and to leave the plane, we needed Jupiter to throw us. Even our knowledge of the sun, the nearest star, the one we depend on for every heartbeat, was capped by the flatness of where we live, until we found a way to be flung above it just once. It was a joint effort between the European and American space agencies, and its goal was something no spacecraft had ever achieved. It was going to fly up over the poles of the sun. It was going to leave the flat plane of the planets at last, climb high above the disk, and look down on our star from the top of the world, studying the sun's poles, which we had never properly seen, because everything we build orbits in the plane and sees the sun forever edge on around its equator. There was just one problem, and by now you know exactly what it was. We did not have a rocket strong enough to do the obvious thing. We could not simply point Ulysses up and fire, because first it would have had to cancel all that inherited sideways motion, all 67,000 miles an hour of it, and we had no engine on Earth capable of building the skyscraper of fuel that would take. The direct route up was, as it always is, unaffordable. So the engineers did something that, if you did not understand the trap, would look like an act of madness. They aimed the probe in the exact wrong direction. They did not send Ulysses up. They sent it out, sideways across the plate, away from the sun, sliding 500 million miles in the wrong direction entirely, toward the giant, toward Jupiter. They spent the spacecraft's whole initial journey going further into the plane, not out of it, because they were not trying to climb under their own power. They were going to borrow the strength of something far larger than any rocket we could ever build. Imagine being one of the engineers, explaining that plan to someone who did not understand the trap. We want to study the top and bottom of the sun, so we are going to launch the spacecraft in completely the wrong direction, away from the sun, out toward Jupiter, and hope the giant throws it where we actually want it to go. It sounds like nonsense. It sounds like setting off west to reach a city in the east. And it was, in fact, the only sane plan available, because there was no rocket on Earth that could take the direct route. The direct route, straight up over the sun's poles, would have required stopping the spacecraft's sideways motion first, and stopping was unaffordable. So the absurd path, the long detour to a giant 500 million miles away, was not the clever option among several. It was the only option there was. The trap was so complete that the only way out of the plane ran through the gravity of another world. Picture the moment it arrived. It is the 8th of February, 1992. Ulysses, after a long fall across the plane, comes sweeping in toward Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, a world over 1,000 times the volume of Earth. The little spacecraft skims past the giant at a distance of only a few 100,000 miles, threading dangerously close to that enormous gravity, and Jupiter seizes it. The giant's gravity grabs the probe and bends its path, hard, wrenching it off the flat plane with a violence no human engine could match. Jupiter rips the sideways momentum out of the spacecraft and flings it upward, hurling it south, up and out of the plane of the planets, onto a steeply tilted path that no human-made object had ever travelled. The throw lifts Ulysses onto an orbit tilted roughly 80 degrees to the plane, very nearly straight up and over the poles of the sun, and for the first time in the history of our species, we had a sustained view of our own star from above and below, looking down on the sun's poles from outside the flat disk that had always held us. We did it. We rose. But look at what it took. We did not conquer the vertical. We could not. To climb even a little way off the table, to lift one small spacecraft up over the poles of our own sun, we had to launch in the wrong direction, sail 500 million miles into the dark, throw ourselves at the feet of a giant, and beg it to throw us. That is the measure of the trap. That is how completely the flat world holds us. Our single real escape from the plane was not an act of conquest at all. It was an act of desperation, and a borrowed one. We could not rise on our own. We had to be thrown. And notice what the borrowing actually cost, because even the cleverness of it underscores the trap rather than escaping it. We did not generate the energy to leave the plane. We could not. So we went and found a body that already had more motion than we could ever manufacture, the largest planet in the solar system, swinging along its own orbit with a momentum beyond anything human engineering will ever match, and we stole a sliver of it. The throw that lifted Ulysses out of the plane came not from us, but from Jupiter, from the giant's huge store of orbital motion, and we were merely the small thing flung sideways and upward by passing close enough to be grabbed. Even our one ascent was, in the end, sideways thinking. We could not rise, so we arranged to be thrown by something that was itself moving along the plane. We never beat the trap. We found, exactly once, a way to make the trap throw us part way out of itself, and we have not managed it again at anything like that scale since. Part 10. The intruder we did not see coming. Everything in our solar system that we worry about lives on the flat plane. The asteroids that might one day strike us, the comets we track, the debris we monitor, almost all of it shares our groove, riding the same level disk. And so, naturally, that is where we point our defenses. All of our telescopes that scan for hazards, all of our planetary watch networks, all of our automated surveys that sweep the sky for anything moving are tuned to look along the plane. We are watching the rim of the plate, scanning the level highway for anything sharing the road with us. We are very good at it. We have catalogued enormous numbers of objects that travel in the plane, but the rest of the universe does not care about our plate. And in the autumn of the year 2017, the alarms finally rang for something that came from somewhere else entirely. An object entered our solar system from far interstellar space. Not from the Oort Cloud at the fringe of the sun's reach, but from beyond it, from the space between the stars, having travelled from another star system entirely. It was the first such visitor we had ever confirmed, the first object we had ever seen that was not born here at all. We named it Oumuamua, a Hawaiian word meaning something like a scout or a messenger reaching out from the distant past. And it did not come from the side. It did not politely merge onto the flat highway of the planets the way a local comet might. It came in steeply, tilted far out of the plane, dropping down through the flat sheet of the solar system from above, on a path so steep and so fast that it could only have come from the great three-dimensional dark, from the vertical, from the place we cannot go. It was moving at around 26 kilometers a second relative to the sun before it ever arrived, on a path so stretched and open that it was never captured, never bound. It fell in from the dark, whipped around the sun, and was already climbing back out toward interstellar space, never to return, on a path that will carry it forever away from us. And here is the part that should unsettle you. We did not see it coming. We did not spot the intruder on its way in. We caught it only after it had already rounded the sun, already crossed the orbit of the Earth, and was on its way back out, fleeing into the dark. By the time our telescopes found it, it was a faint, fast-moving smudge, already leaving, moving too quickly for us to send anything to meet it, too quickly even to photograph it properly. We never got a clear image. We got a handful of measurements of a shadow on its way out the door, and then it was gone. The first messenger from another star, and it slipped through our entire solar system, past our own planet, and we noticed only as it was already saying goodbye. It was not that the sky was empty, it was that the object was small and faint and fast, and most of all, it came from the wrong direction. It came from the vertical, the one direction we do not watch, because it is the one direction nothing of ours has ever travelled. We had all our eyes on the rim of the plate, watching the level road, and something dropped straight in through the ceiling, crossed our world, and left, before we understood what it was. What makes this more than an embarrassing near miss is that it was a first of its kind, a messenger from another star system entirely, and we very nearly failed to notice it at all. For all of history, every object we had ever studied was born here, in our own disk, from our own cloud. Oumuamua was the first confirmed piece of another solar system to ever pass through ours, a fragment carrying information about a place we will never visit, formed around a star we may never even identify. It was, in a real sense, the most exotic visitor our solar system has ever received. And it slipped past us almost unseen, caught only as a fading smudge already on its way out, because it arrived from the direction we are structurally built to ignore. The single most extraordinary object ever to enter our solar system came in through the unwatched ceiling, and we nearly missed it entirely. That is the deeper cost of the trap, and it is worth naming plainly. The vertical is not just the direction we cannot travel. It is the direction we cannot watch. It is a sprawling, unmonitored drop zone hanging directly over our heads, and we are very nearly blind to whatever might be falling toward us out of it. Oumuamua was only a splinter of rock from a dead world, a harmless scrap that did us no harm. But it proved, in the most concrete possible way, that things can and do fall on us from the one direction we never look. Consider how the discovery actually unfolded, because it shows the blindness in action. The object was not found by some vigilant watch trained on the vertical, scanning the dark above the plane for incoming visitors. There is no such watch, because we have never needed one for a direction nothing of ours travels through. It was found almost by accident, by a survey looking for ordinary things in the ordinary places, which happened to catch a fast-moving smudge that did not fit, already past its closest approach, already leaving. By the time astronomers understood what they were looking at, that this was no local comet, but a traveller from another star, it was racing away, too far and too fast to chase. We had, in effect, a single photograph snapped over our shoulder of a guest who had already let themselves out. And that guest was the first of its kind ever detected, which means there were surely others before it, across all of history, that fell through our plane and left again with no one to notice them at all. The vertical has been delivering visitors the whole time. We have simply never been facing the right way to see them arrive. And Oumuamua was small. The vertical hides much heavier ghosts. Consider this. Drifting through the galaxy, between the stars, there are worlds that belong to no sun at all. Planets that were violently flung out of their birth systems long ago, ejected into the dark, bound to nothing, orbiting nothing. They wander the open three-dimensional space between the stars, and there may be more of them in our galaxy than there are stars. More rogue, sunless planets than suns. Whole worlds, some of them as massive as Jupiter, drifting in the freezing black, and because they have no star to light them, they shine with no reflected light at all. They are, to our telescopes, almost perfectly invisible. We find them only by rare tricks, by the way their gravity bends the light of a star behind them, or by the faint warmth they have not yet lost. Billions of dark, massive worlds, wandering the unmonitored vertical between the stars. When we scan the flat plane of our solar system, we are looking for things that reflect sunlight. That is how we find asteroids and comets. They catch the sun and glint. But the dark worlds falling through the vertical catch nothing. They swallow the light. If one of them were falling toward us right now, dropping straight down from the ceiling, there would be no warning glint, no sudden flash, nothing to catch our automated eyes. We would not see it approaching at all. We would only know it was there when the stars behind it began to vanish. A growing circle of darkness, sliding silently across the sky from directly overhead, as a great dark world we never saw coming blotted out the stars, one by one. The vertical does not announce its heaviest visitors with light. It announces them with absence. I do not say this to frighten you, and I want to be honest about the odds, which are comfortingly small. Space is enormous, and such an encounter is staggeringly unlikely on any human timescale. But the point is not the danger. The point is the blindness, and what the blindness reveals about our situation. We have built our entire sense of the sky around the things that shine, because shining things are what our methods can find, and shining things mostly live in the plane. The dark things, the unlit wanderers, the heavy ghosts that drift through the vertical between the stars, are simply outside what our instruments are shaped to notice. And so we have quietly, without ever deciding to, defined the universe as the lit part of it, the part we can see, the part that lives in our plane. The unlit vertical, full as it may be, sits in a blind spot we mistake for empty space. Our map of what is out there is not a map of what is out there. It is a map of what reflects sunlight in the plane we are trapped in. That is the realization I want you to carry out of this part. Our sense of safety beneath the night sky, the feeling that nothing is bearing down on us out of the dark, is not really a fact about the sky. It is a fact about our instruments. We feel safe overhead because we cannot see overhead, and we have mistaken our blindness for emptiness. We are watching the wrong direction, and the right direction is the one we cannot afford to enter, cannot afford to watch, and cannot see into at all. We are blind in exactly the direction we cannot travel, and the universe, every so often, drops something through it, just to remind us. Part 11. The bigger plate. You might be tempted, at this point, to think of the flat plane of the solar system as a local problem, a quirk of our particular star system. Escape that one disk, you might think, get out past the planets and into interstellar space, and surely then you are finally free in the open three-dimensional dark. Surely the trap ends at the edge of the solar system. It does not. Because we are not trapped in one flat plane. We are trapped in two, one nested inside the other, and the second one is far, far larger. Our entire solar system, the whole flat plate of planets, and the sun at its center, is itself a tiny speck embedded inside a much greater disk, the Milky Way galaxy. Hundreds of billions of stars, enormous clouds of gas and dust, glowing nebulas where new stars are born, all of it flattened, just like our solar system, and for the very same reason, into a single, enormous spinning plate. The galaxy is a disk, too, a fossil of its own ancient spin, and we live profound inside it, embedded in the thin sheet of stars, riding along near its plane. We are stuck on the rim of a small plate that is itself stuck inside a colossal one. The trap is not local at all. The trap is fractal. It repeats at every scale. And being trapped inside the galactic plane has a consequence that mirrors, almost exactly, our blindness in the solar system. When astronomers try to look out at the distant universe, at the distant galaxies, the great structures, the very edge of what we can see, the direction matters enormously. If they look up, out of the galactic plane, perpendicular to the disk, the view is gloriously clear. They can see, almost forever, out past the edge of our own galaxy, into the distant dark, between galaxies, all the way to the most distant objects in existence. The vertical, out of the galactic plane, is the clean window. But if they try to look sideways, along the plane of the galaxy, into the thick of all those hundreds of billions of stars and all that dust, the view is blocked. The sheer density of our own home, all that gas and dust packed into the disk, forms a physical curtain. Looking along the galactic plane is like standing in the middle of a dense, burning forest and trying to see the horizon. The trees are too thick. The smoke is too heavy. You cannot see out. Astronomers have a name for that curtain. They call it the zone of avoidance. It is a great band that wraps all the way around our sky, tracing the plane of the Milky Way, and to our ordinary telescopes, the ones that see invisible light, it is very nearly impenetrable. It blocks roughly 20% of the entire universe beyond our galaxy from our view. 1/5 of all the galaxies that exist, hidden from us, not because they are too far away, but because our own galaxy is standing in the way, edge on, boarding up the windows. We have managed to peer through some of it with other kinds of light, with infrared that slips through the dust more easily, and with radio waves that pass through it almost freely. And those methods have cut the obscured fraction down and revealed glimpses of what hides behind the curtain. But in ordinary visible light, the light our own eyes use, a full fifth of reality remains in shadow. Stop and feel the weight of that fraction. Not one galaxy, not a handful, but a full fifth of everything beyond our own, hidden, simply because of where we are sitting and which way we are forced to look. Every map of the universe you have ever seen has a blurred stripe running through it, a band where the data thins and the certainty fails, and that stripe is not a flaw in the telescopes. It is the shadow of our own home, cast across the rest of creation. We are inside the burning forest, trying to chart the world beyond the trees, and along an entire band of the sky, the smoke simply wins. There could be anything back there. There is, almost certainly, an enormous amount back there. And the reason we cannot simply rise above the trees and look down over them is the same reason that has run through this entire story. To rise out of the galactic plane and peer over the wall, we would have to go up and up at every scale we have ever encountered is the direction we cannot afford, and we have reason to believe something important is hidden in exactly that shadow. Our whole region of the universe, our galaxy, and many of its neighbors, is being drawn through space toward an enormous concentration of mass, a great gravitational pull we can feel in the motions of galaxies, but cannot cleanly see, because a large part of it lies behind the curtain of the Milky Way's plane. We are being pulled, measurably, towards something we cannot fully look at, and the reason we cannot look at it is the same reason we cannot go up. We are inside a disk, edge on, to the very direction we most want to see, and the disk is in the way. It is one thing to be blind to a fifth of the distant sky. It is another to know that one of the most important things shaping the motion of our own galaxy is sitting in that blind stripe, pulling us toward it, while we squint at it through gaps in the dust, unable to rise high enough to see it plainly. The trap does not just limit where we can travel, it limits what we are allowed to understand about the forces moving us, and behind that curtain there is real abundance. Billions of galaxies, enormous superclusters. There is even a tremendous concentration of mass back there, a great pull on our whole region of the universe that we can study only through gaps in the dust and with longer wavelengths of light because we cannot see it cleanly at all. We literally do not know, in full detail, what is sitting just on the other side of our own home. Why can we not simply rise up out of the galactic plane, climb above the disk, and look down over the wall, the way Ulysses rose above the plane of the planets to see the sun's poles? For exactly the reason this whole story has been circling, we cannot afford to. The vertical out of the galactic plane is closed to us for the same fundamental kind of reason the vertical out of the solar system's plane is closed to us. We are moving with the disk, embedded in it, carried along by it, and to climb up and out and look down would mean fighting motion and distance on a scale that makes even the Ulysses maneuver look trivial. We are sliding sideways across a far greater table now, and this table too has boarded up its windows. 1/5 of the sky stays locked in shadow, and we are pinned in the plane, unable to rise high enough to peer over the edge of our own galaxy and see what is hidden behind it. The trap you have been lying inside this whole time is not the solar system. The trap is the shape of every disk we live within, repeating, scale after scale, each one flattening us, each one holding us in its plane, each one hiding from us whatever waits in the direction we cannot go. It is almost as if the universe has a preferred way of building things, and that way is flat. Spinning clouds become disks. Disks become solar systems. Galaxies are disks. Even when galaxies gather into larger structures, they tend to string themselves along sheets and filaments, rather than filling space evenly in every direction. Flatness, it seems, is not a quirk of our particular home, but a profound habit of the cosmos, a consequence of spin and gravity working together everywhere, at every scale. And wherever there is a flat structure, there is a plane, and wherever we sit inside a plane, the same trap closes around us, the same easy sideways, and the same forbidden vertical, the same clear view perpendicular to the sheet, and the same blinded view along it. We are not unlucky to be caught in one flat trap. We are living inside a universe that builds flat traps everywhere, nested one inside another, and we happen to be near the middle of several at once. Part 12. Pinned to the wheel. So let us come back, at the end, to where we started, to you lying there beneath the sky. We began with a feeling, the oldest feeling we have about space, the feeling that it is freedom. The great open dark, with no floor and no ceiling, where any direction is possible and nothing holds you down. And we have spent this whole time slowly taking that feeling apart, not to frighten you, but to show you something stranger and quieter than fear. The openness is real. There genuinely is no floor and no ceiling out there. Every direction genuinely is open. There is no wall. There was never a wall. And none of that has set us free. Because freedom in space was never about whether the dark is open. The dark is open. Freedom was about whether you could choose your direction, and you cannot. You were born on a flat disk, already moving, carried sideways at 67,000 miles an hour, along a plane you did not choose and cannot feel. And that inherited motion has decided your whole life where you and your entire species are permitted to go. We can slide along the plane to any world we like. We have visited all of them, and we cannot rise up out of the plane into the open dark above, because to do that we would have to stop, and stopping costs more than leaving the sun behind forever. There is no wall. The cage is made of motion, and you cannot break a motion, you cannot even feel, any more than you can break a price. We are a sideways species. We are like creatures living on the surface of a wide, fast river, paddling expertly back and forth across the current, able to reach any point on the water we choose, and yet completely unable to climb up out of the river into the air above it. We mistake our skill on the surface for freedom. We are very good at going sideways. We have never once truly gone up. And the river carries us, always, in the one direction we did not choose. It is worth being clear that this is not a counsel of despair. The point of seeing the trap is not to feel small or hopeless beneath it. The point is the opposite. It is to feel, accurately, for the first time, the real shape of the place we live. And there is a kind of wonder in that accuracy that the easy story of open freedom could never give you. The cosmos is stranger and more structured than the simple picture of boundless emptiness. We live on a frozen record of an ancient spin, embedded in a far greater record of a far older spin, pinned by a motion we cannot feel to a plane we cannot leave, while above and below us an entire unvisited dimension goes about its business, dropping the occasional ghost through our world to remind us it is there. That is not a smaller universe than the one you started the night believing in. It is a far larger and far more interesting one. It is just one in which our own place is humbler and clearer than we like to imagine. The true up, the absolute vertical, straight out of the great flat table that holds the sun and all its worlds, is still out there in the dark, an infinite, almost entirely unvisited dark. It is full, not empty. It is where the frozen ghosts of the Oort Cloud drift for millions of years before they fall. It is where Hale-Bopp dropped from and where it returned, a glowing scythe slicing through our plane once in 25 centuries. It is where Oumuamua came from, the scout from another star that crossed our whole world before we even noticed it leaving. It is where the dark rogue worlds wander, the heavy invisible ghosts that would announce themselves only by the stars winking out behind them. The vertical is the busiest, fullest, most consequential direction in the universe, and it is the one direction we will never truly know because we cannot afford the breaks. Everything we have followed tonight has pointed back to that single, quiet fact. The flatness of our solar system, born from an ancient spin, the sideways motion we inherited and cannot feel, the brutal, lopsided cost of stopping, more than the cost of leaving forever, the locked room above the sun, the borrowed throw that lifted Ulysses once and has not been repeated since, the comets and the interstellar scout falling through a ceiling we cannot watch, the dark, wandering worlds we would only notice by their absence, the galaxy's own far greater plane, hiding a fifth of creation behind its edge. Every one of these is the same trap, seen from a different angle, repeating at every scale we have ever looked at. We live inside disks within disks, pinned by motions within motions, free to slide forever sideways and almost never to rise. Maybe, far in the future, some descendants of ours will pay the bill. Maybe with engines that sip their fuel slowly over decades, or sails that lean on starlight, or throws borrowed from one giant after another, they will inch their way up out of the plane and learn to live, a little, in the vertical we cannot enter. I hope they do. But even if they do, They will not have broken the trap. They will only have found a way to afford it over lifetimes with patience we do not yet have. The bill will still read the same. The geometry will not have changed. The plane will still be flat. The inherited speed still enormous. The cost of stopping still greater than the cost of leaving forever. They will simply have grown abundant enough or patient enough to pay what we cannot. And when they finally rise and look down on the flat disk of the solar system from above, as Ulysses did for a few brief years over the sun's poles, they will be looking down at the floor where we spent our entire history, the floor we could never leave, the bright, crowded plane that was, for all of us who came first, the whole of the reachable world. So tonight, before you drift off, let the picture rearrange itself one last time. You are not lying beneath an open sky. You are lying on the surface of an immense flat wheel, turning slowly, racing forward, carrying you sideways through the dark, at a speed you will never feel. Above you and below you, perpendicular to everything you have ever done, stretches a whole open dimension you have a word for and almost no experience of, full of slow comets and dark wandering worlds, and the long clean view to the edge of the universe, and you cannot reach it, not because anything bars the way, but because you can never stop sliding long enough to turn and rise. There is no wall. There never was. There is only the wheel and the speed and the long sideways road and the quiet dark overhead that you have lived beneath your whole life. Let it be a comfort rather than a sorrow. The cosmos is stranger and more beautiful than the simple story of open freedom, and you are inside the real one, on the turning floor of it, beneath a ceiling you can almost feel. And so I will leave you with the thought I promised you at the very beginning. The greatest illusion of the night sky is not how far away the stars are. We tend to think that is the humbling thing, the distances, the unreachable depths of space. But the distances are not the illusion. The illusion is closer than that. The illusion is the feeling, lying out under the stars on a clear night, that you are floating free beneath them, that you are weightless in an open cosmos, suspended in all that freedom, able, in principle, to drift off in any direction at all. You are not, you never were. You are pinned to a wheel you cannot feel, sliding endlessly sideways across a flat black plate, carried by a current that began before you were born and will not stop until long after you are gone. There is no wall around you. There is only the speed in your own body and the price of stopping it, and the whole open dimension above your head that you have lived beneath your entire life and almost never touched. The one direction you will never truly know is up. Rest easy beneath it.